Welcome to the Weekly Multifamily Roundtable, where each week we get together and try to learn something new about multifamily investing. Whether you're new to apartment investing or old and crusty like us, if you're looking to take your real estate investing career to the next level, then you are in the right place. Come join us as this week we set off to learn more about focusing in. Do you go laser focus or do you go broad focus when you're looking at your real estate investing career? One way or the other, we're going to have a lot of fun here tonight as we're joined by the one, the only Logan Freeman and, Jerome Myers. He's also here. Nah, I'm just kidding. Jerome Myers has the high score record for most appearances on this show now. By far, he's winning.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan had to take a vacation this week because he wasn't able to hang, and
he couldn't do it.
He had to bring in a power hitter.
There we go.
Hey, I'm the closer, baby.
I'm the cleaner, so I'm right above you then.
Are these references from what's that book? Relentless by Tim Grover?
Yes,
the
it is.
Closer and the Cleaner.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Nice. I've never actually read that book, but I've had it recommended so many times.
That's probably a mistake that you haven't read it.
No, I've intentionally not read it. Yeah, because
I think that book will land with some folks, and with others, it will come off. I don't know. It won't land with some people. They're going to read that and then set it down. But I like to read books that I read it and I'm like, what the heck's this guy talking about? I sit it back down, and 3 months later, I'm like, maybe I should pick that back up. And it's usually the books that challenge your belief system that you need to read. And so if I'm reading something and I've heard it before and I'm like, okay, yep. I'll start scanning it. And I'm like, okay, that was great regurgitation of the same information. But what I'm looking for is something different, something that's going to stand out and challenge my beliefs and what I've been doing up to this point. So I'm always looking for something unique. And that's what Tim Grover set out to do in that book. And he didn't care what anybody else thought. And he didn't write that book to make money. Same thing with MJ DeMarco. He didn't write that book to make money. He self-published his two books. And when you don't care about selling the books, that's where you get into the messaging that really starts to hit home. So those are two authors that I love, that if Tim would maybe come out with another
a follow-up.
Yeah, man,
I'm curious,
great.
when you guys are reading, are you guys taking notes? I find, like, Logan, when you're talking about those books where it's just kind of regurgitating everything that you've already heard before. You skim through it. You're not consuming it very deeply, but those books that kind of hit you from left field, do you stop? Do you do something extra to process that? Or do you guys just, what's your process there? I'm curious.
I'll show you how I read a book. Okay. So Tim Ferriss is really big on, how to read. And I took some lessons from Tim, but I have one of these cards, right, in every single book that I read. So I got the book Dog Eared. This is Knowing Isn't Doing by Rod Satsamassimo. You can't even get this book yet. I was on the pre-book, list. So I got it, but I'm writing down things that I want to revisit. And a book like this, I will sit down and I will write an actual book review on. So nice. I've always been one to try to take notes and not just read something and put it back on this beautiful shelf here, but actually learn something from it. And the only way I can learn is repetition. So I like to write that stuff down, dog ear it. I'm not selling these books, they're going to be hopefully a library I can give to my kids, and it'll be so big one day they won't actually move it. Maybe they'll actually keep it. Who knows? But
like, that's too much work.
There's an advantage to doing it with on the note cards versus, a lot of people go through and highlight the book and write in the margin, dog ear the page, or put a Post-it note on the page. Do you find that method is better retention or easier to go back and reference?
It works for me, Rodney, because I have sections on my cue cards. So I've got to-dos, right? So like I'm reading this one right out of this book, write post on page 85, right? So I'm creating content out of something that I've read, or here's the big ideas, and I bullet those out, and then I say look into, and then I have different sections of the cue card that I utilize on there. So I've got quotes that I like that I'll post. I'll have things that I want to put a post up about. I'll have bullet points of the main ideas that I'll summarize for myself so I can go back and read that really quickly. And then if I don't understand something, then that's when I call a guy like Jerome and say, man, I read this and I don't really get what they're saying, you know? And so, you know, I try to break it down, and that's the way that I've found to be valuable for me. But, you know, everybody's got their own methodology, I'm sure. Jerome listens to all his books. So, you know, I don't know.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. What happened?
I decided that I needed to sit still and actually stop multitasking.
Okay.
Felt like that would be more impactful. And so I don't have a fancy card. My books have pen writing in the margins, stuff underlined, stars, and I'm not getting anything out of it unless I open the book and flip through the pages. But I can tell people where that thing is, right? It's in that book. Now I just got to go find the page on the book that it's on, and I probably find some other stuff while I'm doing the search. And so for me, that makes it worth it, right?
Yeah.
You pick up those things. It's like listening to a song. You're like, I don't remember that ad lib being there, right? I was listening to some Young Jeezy today. I went back, I think it was 2005 when he first came out. He was super gritty and hungry.
Yep.
I needed some of that energy today. And I didn't realize that ad lib was there. And I just didn't realize how clever the guy was with the things that he was doing. And it's just, it pushes you to a new place because it's like, man, this is refreshing when everything's starting to sound the same or you can't understand anything of what people are saying. And now I can go get this and I can remember the moments in my life where I was and why this stuff was significant for me. And for me, that's a big deal.
There you go.
How about you, Rodney? What's your technique?
Well, I'm primarily a listener, so I'm still in that camp because I'm a very I don't know what's the word for it when, you know, I'm a tactile learner for one thing, you know, by doing it, it solidifies what I know. And the same goes with
auditory
reading, with auditory learner. Thank you. Because my wife is a serious note taker. She can write down all kinds of stuff. If I go in somewhere and I'm taking notes, I miss 3 things the guy said while I was writing down the first thing.
Yeah.
And so it's easier for me to listen and I can retain a lot of that information. And then, you know, I can go back and look at her notes. Now, do you always have your wife with you or your administrative assistant to take notes? No. So now I have gotten better, believe it or not, at typing notes. I can type notes. And I think because I type so much that I can type words and I don't have to think about how to type it. And so I can type in an outline form. Works great for me. I just jot down ideas as I'm going, and if it's a sub idea, I can just tab in and hit enter twice if I need to go back out. And I've gotten pretty proficient at that method.
Yeah, I think so. Whatever your method is for retaining information, you're going to want to put it to full effect here tonight, dear listener, because we got you on the video, we got you auditory. We're going to be relying on you to take some notes too. And I think the topic that we're covering here tonight is a really interesting one because it's the difference between, do you go broad, kind of like a shotgun focus with your real estate investing, or maybe personal development or education, or, you know, like in anything, insert anything, right? Or do you laser in and say, I'm going to get good at this particular thing. I'm only going to focus there, and then I'm going to move on. And I'm curious where everybody kind of falls. If it'll be kind of a lame show if we all fall in one camp. So somebody's going to have to play our devil's advocate. Jerome, I nominate you.
This can apply to, you know, whether it's like Logan focuses on Kansas City and I focus on the Southeast. You guys focus on Minneapolis. So it can apply to a range of things, right? And so if we explore why we do what we do, I think that's what we're aiming for here. So, you know, why do you concentrate on Kansas City and Jerome? Are you Carolinas broad, or are you Carolinas just a few cities? A few cities.
with an hour and a half radius around it.
Okay. So
Jerome doesn't want to be driving all day to get to his properties.
Right.
Driving, flying, any of that.
Yeah.
I'll start us out with a story.
Here we go.
Ooh, I like
And
stories.
this is a story from my own life. So more of an experience, I guess, than a story. I think you can look at the strategy of going broad or niche in a few different capacities. I'll start out with it from a business perspective first, and then we can jump into real estate focus. Does that sound all right?
I like it.
Perfect.
All right. So, 3.5 years ago when I was fired from my job and I came in one day at 6 a.m., they only bring you in at 6 a.m. and send you a message at 7 p.m. the night before that meeting's actually at 6 a.m. for one reason. So I brought my own cardboard box with me, and I only brought my cardboard box because I had my books on my desk, and I knew that their policy was when they fired somebody, you couldn't take any of your stuff with you. I don't know, it was a weird policy, but they just kind of said, we'll ship it to you later. And I was like, all right, whatever. But I wanted to get my books in. So when I got fired, I started my company. Well, it was not a real estate company. A lot of folks don't know this, but I started a sales consulting company the day that I got fired, and I took a job as the head of acquisitions for a $50 million fund because I wasn't sold. I wasn't sold on real estate being my only, avenue for revenue. And so I grabbed the Inc. 5000's, fastest growing companies list and decided to call the first 1,000. And when I did, I got 3 of them that were willing to pay me. So, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'll do whatever you need me to do. And that might have been the best or the worst kind of, answer to their question that I ever gave. It was good because it got me started, but it was bad because it had me going in so many different directions. I was building CRM systems. I was training salespeople. I was flying around the country, going to their events, pitching their products. I was, doing all of these, different things. And at the same time, I was, buying 10 properties a month for this $50 million fund. And 6 months into this, my wife, it looks like we might have dropped Anthony. I don't know, but I'm just going to continue to go. 6 months in, my wife, who her top talent from the Strength Finders test is strategic. Mine is bulldoze. And that's not even a talent. That's just one that I've created. It's a competition achiever mixed together, and I'm just a bulldozer. So I just bulldoze through things. Well, she goes, let's go for a walk. And so we went out for a walk, and she said, hey, I'm really impressed with what you've been able to do on the real estate side and the consulting side. But at the same time, all you do is complain about this sales consulting that you're doing, and all you do is talk about real estate. What if you just focused on one of them? And I was like, well, there's a light bulb moment, right? I mean, let's just make it for effects here, visual effects. There was my light bulb moment, right? And so I kind of said, well, I think that might be a good idea. And so I narrowed my focus into just doing real estate, and I doubled my business after that, the next 6 months. And so from a broad perspective into a narrow perspective really helped me focus just from a general business perspective because I was doing 2 completely different jobs. And I have a quote that I want to, introduce to you guys here. This was something that somebody posted on LinkedIn on one of my posts. And so this is not from me, but it's so good I saved it. He said, a mentor of mine once told me, if you live a wide life, you'll have a narrow influence. If you narrow your life, then you'll widen your influence. Influence is what we want. Influence is a catalyst for change. Change is the necessary component for growth. So you need to narrow your life to the point where your influence is so strong that anywhere you go, people will grow. And I tell you what, man, that guy needs to write a book. I don't even know who that guy was.
That is fantastic.
He just posted that on my LinkedIn. Never talked to the guy in my life. And so what I've tried to do now is say, okay, now we're in real estate. Well, great. I did over 200 properties on the single family home side. When I stopped doing that, I took my idea of real estate syndication to that broker, and he said, no way, you'll never succeed. That's the big boys. You don't know how to play in that game. And what I realized was that from listening to David Goggins, was because he couldn't see himself doing that, he couldn't see me doing it. And so that was fine. So I realized I needed to get out of that sphere of influence and go find a new sphere of influence. And so now when I look at real estate, and I still hadn't learned my lesson, guys. When I got into real estate, I was like, well, I got to get into some deals. I got to find something that we can do. So I was brokering multifamily deals, mixed use assets. I was buying hotels, believe it or not. And I was buying all of these weird mixed use assets because I could get myself into those projects. And, what I realized after doing it was 4 projects, was that they were so difficult because the market was they were not asking for that type of product. And so I started to realign with, okay, where's the education space at? What do people know? What can they understand? And it was multifamily, it was self-storage a little bit, and it was triple net lease. And so I started to really narrow myself down into just doing that specifically. And when I did that, that's when my influence started to widen and really go deep. So I'm a practitioner now. And I still get shiny object syndrome, just like everybody else does. But I'm a pretty narrowed, focused guy when it comes to the real estate side of things, geographically and asset type class, because I realize that when you can become the expert in one thing, that's when you start to really have influence over other people. So I'll leave it at that, and we can kind of dive into that, or some other folks can give their perspectives. But that's the story I wanted to tell.
Oh boy. So when I started, I was doing everything. I was cutting trees down. I was all over the place. And somebody said, I don't know what you actually do or what you do well, because you can't do everything well. I was like, oh, well, I'm just doing something. And so typically what I see, especially when I'm coaching people, is you want to do a bunch of stuff because you don't know what's going to make money. And so you're just throwing stuff on the wall and you're trying to see what sticks, and then I'll do it that way. But the issue with that is you can't craft a message that's going to penetrate any market or any person to do anything meaningful with you, because they are just confused when they're looking at stuff. And so you've got to get really clear about your message. Most people sitting out there will say, I don't know what my message is because I don't know what works. And I'm going to tell you, you got to pick something, right? Find your sandbox, build a fence around that sandbox, and then play in the sandbox. And anybody who wants to come be in that sandbox has to come play with you.
I'm curious, how long do you stay in your sandbox and play and build those sandcastles before you start to either make the judgment call, okay, this is something that I can be the best at, I can be very good, I can win at this thing, or you start to realize, okay, this was a bad choice and I need to make that pivot? That's always a hard decision to make, right? Is like, do you stick it out because things take time and mastery doesn't happen overnight. It's a long journey. But on the other side, being realistic and saying, okay, maybe this actually isn't the best application of my time and energy and skills. In the same sense that Logan with the consultancy, he probably could have stuck with that, but it might've been the wrong choice overall. So how do you guys make that decision?
I'll go first on this one. For me, you've got to be committed to doing the work until it's done. Logan was talking last week about chopping wood and carrying water, and it's just that simple. Like, once you commit to this is the thing you're doing, and you know that the sandbox you're in is valuable, you just got to figure out why the thing isn't working. And so that means bringing in somebody who's got a different perspective than what you have to fix those things. Like, marketing is something that a lot of people don't want to invest in early because a lot of people see it as snake oil. I still see it as snake oil the majority of the time, because I was actually having this conversation today. There's a whole lot of people who are great marketers who don't know much about doing multifamily investing, who can raise the whole world and could convince people to spend a whole lot of money with them for education. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter how good your product is if nobody knows that you have that product. And so you've got to figure out how to do it. And one of the things I like most about what I've watched Logan do over the past 18 months is the way that he's rebranded, and he's put money in places strategically so that when people come see FTW and some of the other stuff he's done, you're like, oh, these guys are the real deal. They're big boys and they've been doing this a long time. That matters. People are pretty shallow when it comes to evaluating a person's capability and worth. So is what it is.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Do you have a question to follow that up, Anthony?
No, I just really like this idea of like figuring out what's not working, but then asking yourself, like, what is it? Is it that I'm not trying hard? Is it that I'm not giving it enough time? Is it I'm putting my leverage in the wrong areas? And, you know, at a certain point, it helps to have somebody in your life like Logan's wife who can pull you aside at some point and say, hey, maybe the reason this isn't getting as much traction as you want it to is because you don't love it. And you're not like fully committed to like putting in, like, I'm sure Logan, you were putting in all the hard effort and work and everything, but at the end of the day, you just didn't love it. And if you're missing that passion link, it's going to be very, very hard to win at any business.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm going to try to break this down even further. And to me, it comes down to two things. Either you're doing the wrong thing or you need to be better. And what I mean by that is you have to have rigorous self-evaluation. You know, Ray Dalio is always talking about radical transparency. And if you can't take feedback or you don't listen to feedback, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. If you can't listen to feedback, then how are you going to understand what you're doing is working or not? So 2 questions I would ask somebody if they want to pivot, because many of you guys might not know, at the beginning of March, I was all in on triple net lease neighborhood retail shopping centers. I had $20 million worth of those under contract right before COVID hit and dropped them all and haven't looked at one since, because you have to ask yourself 2 questions, you know, and you can also stand on the shoulders of giants, right? This has all been done before. So watch what other people are being successful at. But the first question is, are people buying what you're doing? Like, are they buying it? You know, MJ DeMarco is always talking about if you provide real value, and this word value, I hate it now because I hear it value add. You know, I just want to provide value.
Hey, let me know how I can add value to you and your community. Like
4 calls this week. Hey, I just would really like to add value to you. That is the number one reason or red flag that I hear that is like, this person's probably a taker. They're trying to disalarm me and find out something that they can piggyback on top of me on. I just want to add value to you. Like that anyways, that's a tangent. But you have to realize if people aren't buying what you're selling, either you're selling the wrong thing or you're just not good enough, right? And so to me, it's like, look, when I was selling hotels, yeah, I got it done because I'm a freaking bulldozer, and I got it done because I made it happen. But most folks would have given up. I had to put hard money up twice on that deal, and I didn't have any money, but I made it happen, right? So I bulldozed those through. At this point, I wish I didn't own 2 hotels, but it is what it is. I couldn't foresee a health crisis, but you also have to get better. You know, if you're having investor calls and you can't build rapport on the phone, you need to start reading on how to talk to people, how to communicate, how to build trust. If you can't talk on a video screen or present something, guess what? You got to get better. You can't just read off of a freaking screen. Like, you have to be able to take that feedback. And sometimes that feedback means you're just not good enough. And that's okay, because everybody's on this different level of a continuum. That's all right. I have got to get better. I sat down today with my partners and I was like, hey, my wife, she looks at you two and she really knows what you guys do. Like, Parker, you're a real estate developer. Corey, you've done 5,000 units. She understands that. She looked at me the other day and said, what the hell do you do, Logan? Like, what do you do? Like, what is your part? And I'm like, well, I do the podcast and I find deals. And she was like, well, you need to make your message better, right? And like, so today I'm sitting down it's 3:30 a.m. I'm sitting on this couch right here, and I'm feeling all this anxiety and I'm feeling all this stuff which I shouldn't be, but I'm putting it on myself. And I realized that, and I keep talking about all this stoicism because I'm diving way back into stoicism, and I'm like, you start talking about that, people are gonna start asking you, what is stoicism? And you better have a damn good answer, because if you don't, what are you talking about, man? Mm-hmm. Like, and so let me show you guys something. So for an hour and a half this morning at 3:30 in the morning, well, 4 because I finished my prayer as well. I sat down and I researched Ryan Holiday. I researched what stoicism is. Where did it come from? Where did it originate? What's his name? Vicino. Yeah, Zeno over in Cyprus.
On the Stoa. So a Stoa is actually the Greek word for porch. And back in, man, I could go on this forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is where the philosophers would get together on the Stoa on the porch, and they would have their conversations and they would have their arguments. And I want to cycle back because you touched on something that's so good. And then I want to dive even deeper into this messaging thing that you're talking about, because I think it's core. It's core to what we do. You're either selling the product. Oh, no, I'm sorry. People are either buying your product or they're buying you, right? If you're a good enough salesperson, you can sell a swift kick in the knee, right? I can convince you that this is good for you. You're going to love this swift kick in the knee. Most people aren't going to buy that though. If you're not a great salesperson, good luck selling that. On the other hand, I could be selling an iPhone. It doesn't matter how much I suck at sales. The thing's probably going to sell itself. I don't have to do much.
Right.
So you either have a product that people are kicking down your door to get, or you're so good at what you do that you can sell it. Now, if people aren't buying, you can look at it and say, does my product suck or do I suck? If you're in real estate, your product probably doesn't suck that badly that you can't get people to buy it.
Sure.
So you're probably the weak link.
That's exactly right, man. And for me, I really go back to, our product is proven. We've done it a lot. So whenever I don't close something or I don't convert, or it's on me, right? And that's that extreme ownership from Jocko. And I'm like, all right, well, let me break this down. What did I do wrong? Well, I wasn't present on that call. You were texting somebody else because somebody else was pulling you from that call, and you were out there walking, or, and you were texting or you checking LinkedIn while you were on that phone call and you weren't present. And that subliminally came through the phone, because there is something to be said about when you're on the phone. When I used to smile and dial 265 times a day, I legitimately smiled and dialed every single time, because that changed the way that I came off. And so, for me, it's really important to look back at where in the process did I have a misstep? What did I mess up? Because I've done it before. It's proven. The recipe is there. Whenever it doesn't work or it doesn't pan out, it's usually on me. And so I think so many times people are like, well, I didn't get that deal done because this, and this, or COVID happened. Bularchy. You didn't get it done because either, like Anthony said, your product sucked or your deal sucked, or you weren't any good. And sometimes you can be too good. This is what Oren Clough talks about. Sometimes you can be too good and you can get people into something that isn't actually very good, and then you won't last very long. And that's okay, because you're going to go bye-bye really, really quickly. And we've seen that happen multiple times as well. But I think it comes back to, radical transparency. I ask for people for feedback all of the time. I send my deal to folks that I know won't invest, but I'm like, hey, tear this thing apart before I take it to my investors. Give me the 15 questions that you're going to ask me, and let me answer them to you 15 times before I talk to an investor about it, because I only get one shot. You have one shot. And I have a really, really hard time with people who don't take that seriously, because if you get on a call with somebody and they're pitching you an investment to spend $50,000 or $100,000 in, and it's going to be, it's going to be important for your retirement, man, that sponsor on the other end of that line, they better be ready. And if they're not ready and they're not giving you their time, or they're trying to get off the phone, let that be a feedback loop for yourself, And so anyways, I could go on about that all day. But
so I got three things I want to. One is, you're talking about smile and dial, and people can tell when you're not present for the call, because they almost feel like they're either talking to themselves or they feel like they're interrupting you. And that goes hand in hand with the whole value thing. And I caught myself the other day when I was doing a Facebook post, and then I ended up, chatting with somebody down in the messaging, and it's, the whole value thing came up again. And how you're walking through the hallway and you see somebody and you're going, hey, how are you? And is the how are you sincere?
Sure.
Or are you just saying it? And so I really think that if you're going to ask, you should ask in a sincere way, because it really should mean something. And if you're just saying it because it's the word to say nowadays. It's disingenuous. But what we're talking about here is, as far as, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? And whether I should pivot. And there was a post that Jerome put up, and I said on one of the comments, it's perspective. You need to get perspective on it. And you're not always the good person for perspective, right, Jerome?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you gotta get somebody else with some eyes on it, because there's sometimes where, and I use the analogy, I said, if you live on a farm, you don't smell the manure, but somebody else coming on the farm, they can smell the manure. And so you need to get somebody else in the game, and that, like you say, is, and have that transparency and ask for that feedback, because if you don't, you're just going to be running into a wall and you think you're doing great.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. And for me, it's important to be where my feet are. And I'll give you guys an example. I got this off-market deal. It's a vacant piece of crap, old senior living facility, $1 million transaction. It's not on the top of my to-do list. This broker has been after me for a week. And he texted me tonight, right before we got on this call, and he goes, "Look, I'm just going to shoot you straight." And I'm like, "Oh, here it comes, baby. Here it comes." He goes, "I can't believe you won't get on the phone with me for 2 minutes to talk about these buyers who are real and will get this transaction over the finish line." Well, let me shoot you straight, mister, because I am not focusing on that. That's not in my bucket of urgent and important. It's a small project. I've reached out to the sellers or to the owners. I can't get a hold of them. And his last message was, "These guys are going to reach out to him directly." And I send back. I haven't sent it back yet. I drafted it because I
got to sleep on it.
Always
Always sleep on it.
What is it? Old Honest Abe used to write letters, and if he still wanted to send them the next day, he would pull them out. What he didn't know was his wife opened those letters up and didn't send half of them. So that's pretty good. But long story short, I wanted to say back to him, "Look, man, I've done the best that I could to get this connection for you. I'm not even representing the seller. It's an off-market deal, and it's a free market. If you want to go do that, that's fine." But that's a prime example of, I had 7 investors in town the last 3 days. That's where my feet are. I got 420 emails. I know I need to respond to them, but I got a phone. I got a watch that has my notifications off. I thought I would like that. I turned it off the first day because every 2 seconds, Jerome was commenting on something on my LinkedIn. This is it all the time. And I just kept finding myself doing this number. And so you have to be where your feet are. And to me, it's important to make sure your schedule, Jerome's a coach, man. He's coaching people. They're really investing their dollars with his time. What if he was just back to back to back to back to back, and he was just getting sucked down? We all have this decision juice, and by the end of the day, it is zapped, man. Well, at least it is for me. Maybe you guys are a little bit higher performing than I am, but by the end of the day, I have a hard time being where my feet are, because all I'm thinking about is, all right, I got to go pick my little girl up. I want to be present with them and all of that. So you've got to build that into your schedule. So I know Jerome for a fact only has coaching calls at a very specific time where he's prepared, he's bringing the fire, and he is where his feet are. And so just like you said, Rodney, don't say, "Hey, how are you?" and then turn the other way and keep walking. If you really want to chat with somebody, ask them about, "Hey, how are your children doing?" Or "How's your wife doing?" And then sit there and don't be on your phone or looking at something else. So it's something that's very, very important. I don't think a lot of people talk about it, but it can definitely, it definitely comes off on the other end of the recipient that's grabbing that from you. They feel that. And that's really, really important for me to make sure I'm not doing.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that with this idea of, I love that analogy that you had, Rodney, of going down the hall and saying, "How are you?" It's such a flippant thing to say when, if you really evaluate the words that are coming out of your mouth. "Hey, Logan, how are you?" And if I'm asking that question, I should be asking it for a reason. Like, "Hey, Logan, man, you seem really psyched today. How are you? Tell me about that." Or, "Hey, Logan, I'm noticing you're a little bit lower energy. How are you doing today?" Right? It's not just a question that I'm throwing out flippantly. I'm observing some behavior, and I'm going to tie that into trying to add value to people. The thing that annoys me with this culture of, hey, how can I add value to you? It's not my job to tell you how to add value to me. Like, I'm not thinking along those lines. Like, cause I don't go around in my life thinking, how can Rodney add value to my life? You've just given me a chore. And so if you really wanted to add value, if that was really your commitment, then you would go and research what I'm doing, or you would observe what I'm about. And you'd say, hey, I noticed that you're doing this thing over here. I have this skill. Let me take that off your plate. I can do it in this way, right? You've just solved a problem that I didn't even know I had.
That's right.
That's value.
Absolutely, man. I'll share a quick tip on that. It's an acronym. Everything in my life is acronyms because I'm not very smart, and I got to remember that, so this is OSA, OSA. If you really want to strike up a conversation with somebody, make an observation, share a story, and then ask a question. That's all you got to do. OSA, OSA. I used to do that when I would walk in on cold calls to people's offices. I'd make an observation, I'd share a story about something that was related, and then I would ask a question. And that's the way that you can get a conversation going.
That's good tactical advice right there. Jerome, you're sitting over there quiet over there in the matrix. You got to get in this conversation and let me know what's your take on how do we get better at self-awareness and self-evaluation?
It's an oxymoron to say I'm going to get better at self-awareness by myself, right? Like, somebody on the outside needs to come in and help you do a gap assessment and help you do a few things. One, I think the most important one is make sure your stated values are actually your values. A bunch of people are running around talking about all the things that they do and what they're about, and that's not what their actions mean or say. And so you got to do one or two things: change your actions or change your stated values. And that right there is a foundation of everything. Once you get to a place where your stated values are in alignment with your actions, then it's okay, do I have a skill set gap, right? My skill set gap is this: I'm not great at marketing, or I can't build a website, or I'm not good on the phone, or I have fear of rejection, so I don't dial. Whatever it is in the process is going to get you to the place where that thing can happen, the transaction, and then the fulfillment on the back end of the transaction. Like, those are all skills, and all of them can be earned or learned or bought. Right? There's a make-buy decision for everything that you have to do for getting the transaction done and fulfilling the order. And then the rest of it is, how do you want to spend your time? Right? And one of the activities that we do is a more of and a less of list. One thing that was on my less of list was going to Lowe's and Home Depot. I've been there 2 times this year, and I don't plan to go back again because it was on my less of list and I want to do less of it. And so I'm essentially either paying somebody else to go do that for me, delegating it to a property manager or something else, so that I don't make those multiple non-productive runs. Because, as I've got a friend on here that says all the time, is there's profit producing activities. And if this isn't a profit producing activity, then I probably shouldn't be doing it. I should be paying somebody to do it so that I can make some profit.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. That's I like the more of, less of. I use, what do I need to start, stop, or continue? That's red light, yellow light, green light. Start, stop, continue. That's the same framework, just in a different way.
Well, so the continue things are interesting, right? But do you want to continue doing more of them or less of them? I like, because of the football, right? I like black and white. You did it or you didn't. And so I think you either need to be doing more of these things or less of these things, because each one of them has the opportunity cost associated with them. I decided to be on this call tonight. That means I'm not at Yona's thing where I could probably network with some people and potentially sell something to somebody.
Sure.
Right. And so you got to pick. And I've thought a lot about, like, I've thought a lot about the podcasts that have happened since COVID. Like, I've started a whole podcast and recorded a year's worth of content for weekly episodes on that podcast since we started COVID. Like, the amount of time that takes, in addition to what I could have been doing in that time, like grinding stumps or cutting trees or some of this other stuff that I used to do. But I got super clear about, hey, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to do what it takes until. And I'm going to figure out, or have other people say, hey, that's not working. You need to do this. And not having a big enough ego to say, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm good enough, and blah, 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 blah. Like, you've got to surround yourself. And I've mentioned this in a few different conversations, but never on a recording. You've got to find your 5 and be willing to take all of the feedback from them and not be beholden to being right, but the best idea winning in your world.
Mm.
Tell us about that 5.
So if you go through your phone, there's 5 people that you talk to more than anybody else. If you look at your calendar, there's 5 people that you're spending time with, and they're probably tied to the people that are in your messages, whether it's text messages or phone calls. Those people are dictating who you become and what you become. Because you acquiesce into whatever your tribe is doing. If those people don't have what you want, you need to change who you're spending your time with. This goes back to more of less of. And a lot of people feel like it's harsh for me to say nobody's off limits. Not like my mom's not even off limits. My mom wants to talk about the news and how bad the world is, or wants to gossip about this, that, or the third. I don't have time for that. That's not going to help me raise $1 million for this next deal, solve another podcast issue, figure out how to market this conference. It's not going to help me figure out any of those things. And these are the most important things in my world right now. And getting really
Laser focused.
Focus isn't even the word. Like I want to be, some people may call it harsh, right? But nothing is safe. Nothing and nobody is safe. And we've got to, on a daily basis, decide what our priorities are and actually live out to that. And this goes back to the foundational piece of your stated values need to line up with your actions.
Yeah, it's about being ruthless with like adhering to those values. I'd ruthlessly adhering and saying, I'm not going to apologize for not wanting to do that thing. And I love this idea that we rise or fall to the level of the people we surround ourselves with. And you know, I think Logan and Jerome, I don't know if you played football, but you made a football reference there before. So I'm going to, you know, use this analogy is that if we rise and fall to the level of the people around us, you often hear college recruits when they first go to the NFL, they're like, man, these guys, they move so fast. They play at such a the game is so much faster. Right. And it feels like this culture shock, but slowly but surely, you know, they start rising to that level because that's who they're surrounded with. You never hear of anybody rising to that level who then went down, like, you know, to like just play in their community league. Right. Like it just doesn't happen. You're going to slowly but surely rise or fall to the level of the people you surround yourself with. So you need to be really conscious of who those people are. And are they pushing and challenging you, or are you pushing and challenging them? Like, because in the same way, you're beholden to them and trying to raise them up or not hold them down.
So my takeaway on what you were saying is that, you know, if you think about, you have a hard stop on certain things, and that would be like somebody approaching your wife or your daughter or your son. There is a limit to what you allow to transpire between, let's say, somebody else and your family member. There's a hard stop there. But it's amazing the number of people that don't apply the same principle to certain aspects, other aspects of their life, you know, specifically like your career, doing what we're doing, where we have to answer to ourselves, right? And so we let people influence our lives because we want to be polite. And it's not that you have to be in their face and rude, but you have to put those hard stop limits in there, because associating with those top 5 people that may not be a good influence on your life, and then putting yourself in a situation where you can rise to the level by surrounding yourself with quality people, like what Anthony's talking about, you have to be rigid in that. And that's going to define whether you succeed or fail. I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, you hit on a beautiful point there, which I don't know if you guys have read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. Yep. One of his rules is take care of yourself. I'm going to butcher it. So it's take care of yourself as though you were somebody you were responsible for, or that you loved. And it ties into this idea that Rodney's just touching on there, which is that we don't treat ourselves or our career or our pursuits with the same vigor and ruthless commitment as we would if it was like a family member, or if it was even our pet, right? Like we take very good care of our pet, but we don't necessarily take very good care of ourselves sometimes. So
yeah, or we don't give people don't give the same commitment that they do to finish that Netflix series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man,
well, I mean, Netflix is really good, right? Like,
man,
come on.
Did you see, Game of Thrones, that last episode?
No, I did.
The Jerome see any?
Let me jump in on this though, because this one is one that's core for me. Because like we got this nucleus, we start with self-image and then we go to relationships. And for the life of me, I can't understand why we're more polite and kind to people who we don't have a relationship with, and then come home and treat the people that have been there with us through the ups and the downs and treat them like pure trash. True. And like we can talk to them any kind of way. True. And they understand because of this, that, and the third. Like, why aren't they up on the pedestal and then everybody else is walking around underneath it, versus the other way around, where we don't want to offend anybody, we want somebody to say something negative about us. But if you, again, this goes back to stated values, right? If I say that the people that I love are the most important people to me, but I always put them on the back burner to do stuff for people that don't care about me and I probably don't really care about, other than what they can do for me, I think we've got something mixed up. And I really encourage people to get to that place where they don't have any confusion about that type of stuff, because then it makes it really easy for people to predict your behavior, and that predicted behavior leads to more and more and more trust.
Mm-hmm. And to come to that realization, a lot of times you do need an outside person to look at what you're doing, that and I'll just say it, will love you enough to, smack you upside the head, because you may think, oh, I'm doing this for my family. And all the while, your wife's feeling neglected. Your kids never see you. So yeah, it's 100%. And
yeah. And it's those people that care for you the most that can be the most honest. I'm really impressed with Logan's wife, who's like called him out at multiple points and saying like, hey, what do you do in this equation? Right? Like, she's close to the sun on that one. And that would be a really easy thing, just to be like, I have a pretty good idea because I'm here, but and save the awkward, hard conversation of like calling them out. Like, that's tough. And so you got to show gratitude and love for that and say like, I appreciate that. Like, that's hard to hear, but it's what I need to hear. So
yeah, she called me out this morning. Call me out this morning. Let me read you these. I'll give you the story, but let me read you these text messages first, because this is why
Logan's got the radical transparency going over here. He's like, hey, let me bring you in. I'll show you all the deets.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, you hang on to that person.
Oh yeah. She's my rock, man. I texted her later today this, and then I'll get into the story. I said, you always have my back and push me to be a better man. I love you for it. Don't ever stop holding me to the highest standard. So last night, I work hard. Everybody works hard. I got 2 kids under 2, whatever. Everybody's got their stuff, right? But she looks at how dedicated and focused and intentional I am at getting up between 3:30 and 4 every day and focusing on myself and my business and all of that. And I get home, around 5, pick up the baby and come home, and I'm just dead. And so she had this look on her face last night. And I said, well, what's going on? Why don't you just tell me? Because I know it's there. And Jerome's always prodding me to find out exactly what it is that she's, she really wants to say. And so I said, well, why don't you just give it to me straight? So she just goes, you say your faith, your family, and your fitness is the way that you prioritize things, and then your future. But it really feels like, yeah, your faith is there, but your family's coming after your future right now. And I was like, man, and I wrote her off last night. I wrote her off. And, we got up this morning. Everything was kosher, when she woke up and all this stuff. But then I was getting ready to leave, and I was getting ready to go. And she kind of had this look on her face. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, you haven't spent time with me. You aren't present. You're exhausted. And you talk about how we're number one. So she said it again. And I wrote her off again. I got in the truck. I moved it so I could get her car out so I could leave. And we were supposed to have this whole morning together because I posted about that we spend 8 to 11 every day, but I was out the door. And I remember this morning, I spent an hour and a half on effing stoicism. And I'm sitting there acting like a little, I'm not even going to say the word, but I was acting like a little boy. Okay. I was acting like a little boy. So I got back out of the truck. I got out of the car, And I went to the stairs. She was standing on the top of the stairs holding our 7-week-old son. And I looked at her and I said, this is your one shot to tell me what's on your mind, right? That wasn't the right thing to say. And she just gave it to me, man. I mean, boom, and I dropped everything that I was doing. I went and spent an hour with her before we had a home inspection at our house because we're selling today. Inspectors ringing on the door, baby's crying, and I'm sitting there with her for an hour, and we spent the next 2.5 hours just, where we needed to be, where our feet were. And I texted her later that day and said, thank you for always holding me to the highest level. I can't get anything past that girl, nothing. And she has taken me from where I was to where I'm at now and where I'm going to go, because she expects the best. She always says, when you married me, you signed up for something, man. And it's to be putting me first, and so, man, I tell you what, I had to really kind of take some humble pie this morning. And I said, well, I'm sitting there writing about all this stuff. You can't just write about it and talk about it. You got to be about it. And that's really important. I mean, she's my number one, filter for everything. And having that, it wasn't easy to say I was wrong and apologize and sit there and work through it. And I had all this other stuff I wanted to go do, but that's not what it was about. It was about prioritizing and executing. And she, the rest of the day was just googly-eyed over me all day long. Couldn't wait for me to get home and all of these things. And it's all goes back to the crazy cycle that Dr. Emerson Eggerichs wrote about. And did you read that book, Rodney?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Basically, the master tenet of that book is men are all looking for respect. And women are all looking for love. But if you don't have respect, you're not going to get love. And if you don't have love, you're not going to get that respect. So it's going to take one of you to say, let me step back. Let me take a little slice of humble pie and see if I can do something here. So it's a two-way street, but man, I got knocked on my tail this morning from my wife, and she does it about weekly for me. So it's good.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I think it perfectly encapsulates the topic of this conversation, which, we're getting to the top of the hour here, guys. So I'm going to be respectful of your time, because I know you got a wife and a little baby there to go play with. And it sounds like I won't get you any more doo-doo here. So we're not going to run too much longer. But it's this idea that regardless of if you're laser focused or you're going shotgun focused, like in life and business, you're going to have to be doing multiple things. You're going to be carrying multiple priorities at any given point. And you got to figure out how to focus in on any one of those priorities at any given moment and make it the priority. And so, Logan, your words weren't mapping to your actions there, where you were saying one thing, but then on the other side of it was like, hey, I focus on you during this time, this period. And then honestly, you just weren't showing up. Right. And
That's
so that's difficult. That's super hard. And my last words on this topic will be, when it comes to business, it's very easy for family to get pushed more and more and more out of the focus. It's because we know they have our back and they trust us and they love us and that they'll forgive us. And they're the easiest ones to take for granted, but without them, then what's the whole point of any of it? So
that's exactly right, man. Why don't I touch on what you actually brought me on to talk about for a few minutes on the real estate side of things?
Well,
yeah, let's do it.
Before we go into that,
Okay.
I think I want to hear what you said, but to key off what Anthony was talking about, intentionality, right? I mean, we have to be intentional about what we do.
That's right.
If we're not, then we're just all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody knows what we're doing, including ourselves. So anyway, go ahead, because I want to hear what you got to say.
So Logan, why do you focus on Kansas City and geographically niching yourself, but also into really one asset class, which is really multifamily? And something I wanted to talk about was from an acquisition and building a business perspective. I'm lucky enough to be in a market that I can do that. And some folks aren't, and that's okay. I would also challenge those folks that say I can't invest in my backyard to really think hard about that, because you probably can. Just talk to a guy that's up in Philadelphia slanging deals, and he's like, look, I'm making it happen. So that's a different podcast episode or roundtable that we can talk about. Why did I think about Kansas City and staying focused here? It's because I want a competitive edge, and I want to be able to bring or build momentum. And I call it the big mo. And I was telling Jerome this the other day. I think about the business as a runway, and I'm working on this plane. I'm flying this plane, and I'm trying to get it off the ground, right? I'm trying to get it off the ground, and I'm trying to do that in one market and in one asset class. If I can get that off the ground, 90% of a jet's fuel is used up just getting it off of the runway and into the air, into the cruising altitude. So how am I going to build enough momentum, build enough relationships in 4 or 5 different markets in different asset classes to be successful and get that plane off of the runway? And I just couldn't figure that out. And so for me, it was, let me bring a competitive edge to our investors and to our clients and say, look, we have the best in class relationships. We know the neighborhoods. We're here on the ground. We can go look at the properties. I'm closing on 426 units because the coastal guys couldn't fly here to do due diligence. And I could, because that's a competitive edge that I have, because I could put my mask on and I could go walk 426 units, and I did. And so for me, I think about momentum. Where can I have the biggest influence? And that thankfully is in my backyard. But for me, where can I get vertically integrated and build that momentum? And I think it might be difficult to do that at scale across bigger or, multiple markets, unless you have a large company with boots on the ground. So that's my one thought on that, guys, that I know we needed to touch on before we close out.
I love it. Any parting thoughts on that topic, Jerome?
It is a competitive advantage. I'll take it to a deeper level, right? I'm not buying 426 units. I don't think I'll ever will. It's just like, I don't want to count that high, right? But what I do is I want to beat the crap out of doctors, attorneys, whoever else, businessmen who are doing something else and buying real estate on the side. I want to get back to the sandbox analogy. I'm going to get to the sandbox first. I'm going to run. I'm going to get there first. I'm going to put a fence around it. And then I'm going to slow down and decide whether or not I actually want this. And then I'll release it and let everybody else play if I don't want to play there. But I want to be the first to the deal. And you can't be the first to the deal if you got to schedule a flight. You got to get in a car and drive 5 hours one way or the other. And, I don't live in California. I'm fortunate enough to live in a deal state. But for a lot of people, they're saying they can't buy in their backyard because of X, Y, and Z, or because Neil Bawa put out a list and said, you need to invest in this city. And I just don't buy that. And I'll take it a step further, guys. Real estate is hyper local. There are areas in Kansas City you don't want to buy in. You're never going to get any appreciation. There is no upside, regardless of how much you want to value add. Same thing in a bunch of the other markets that are on the list. And so you want to be able to really, and so for me, this is the other thing, and I wish Logan would have said this, but I'll say it. I know what the rents are when somebody tells me what street the property's on. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you before you send me the rent roll whether or not I have interest in the deal. If I'm investing in Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and Florida, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You don't have a shot. And I mean, we haven't even gotten into the city. And then within those cities, there are streets that you don't want to buy. I can't emphasize that enough, especially if something is transitioning, gentrifying, or moving aggressively, where you're trying to be in these emerging market cycles. You don't have a shot. And so I just think you got to own your sandbox and deal with the highs and the lows from that. Because if you don't, you're always going to be a step behind. And let's go back to football. And I did play football, Anthony. I played football in college. Thank you very much. You didn't check LinkedIn.
Dang, I didn't dive deep enough, man. I'm sorry.
Post today. It was just for you. But the fact of the matter is, and I talked about how quickly people are moving and how much stronger they were than me. And the only way that I think you actually get a leverage point is by knowing where the play is, right? Being able to anticipate, get that extra step when you're coming in and you're fresh and you're new. And if you don't have that, if you didn't watch enough tape, you're going to be on the sideline watching the whole time because you're just not going to be able to get to the ball.
Oh man. Yeah. This reminds me of the Wayne Gretzky quote, which, when he was asked, you're not the fastest, you're not the biggest and the strongest. So how are you so great? And he's like, everybody else is skating to where the puck is, and I'm skating to where the puck is going. Right. And that only comes with time and experience and wisdom and seeing enough plays in enough neighborhoods to know where is that puck going or where is that ball headed and getting there before anybody else. So I love that analogy. And I didn't see this football stuff today. I feel like even dumber, man. Jerome,
Rodney commented on it, and this goes back to being where your feet are, Anthony. I mean, you try.
Yeah, I've taken a little bit of a LinkedIn break this last week, so I've been a little bit distant. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm coming back. But I mean, this conversation got me energized and fired up to come back and see the content you guys are putting out, because you're always putting out fire, both of you boys, and Rodney as well, all three of you guys. So, Rodney, any parting words of wisdom before we let these gentlemen go about their lives?
Yes. So, well, let's not. I don't have any parting wisdom, but but let's get these guys to tell us how people can get in touch with them. Because I mean, this podcast was awesome. We came on here with a particular subject. It took us like 15 minutes to even get to the subject, but all that content before was phenomenal. I mean, everything this podcast has talked about and this live stream has talked about has been great. And so you guys, Jerome, I think our audience probably has memorized how to get in touch with you, but you tell us again how to get in touch with you. And then Logan, you give us your contact information too.
All right. So I'm gonna give them the misdirection so we can run the flea flicker. I need them to go to JeromeMyers.co. There you can find out everything. We've got all kinds of stuff. New website. I'm just grateful.
I was going to say, is this a new address?
Yeah, you're going to have to send that to me so I can put it in the show notes.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's just his name, but then instead of .com, it's .co, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is that? See how good I am at spelling? There we go in the chat.
There it is.
Nice.
Find me on
JeromeMyers.co.
You can find me on LinkedIn. Look in the comments on Logan's post. I try to make sure he has at least 50 notifications a day. Gets up at 3 a.m. He has to spend an hour going through it and figuring out what he got to respond to and whatnot.
See if you guys can see my LinkedIn. That's three figures. That's 106 notifications.
Turn that off. I got tired of my watch buzzing and my phone buzzing, so I turned all those notifications off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I need to. I turned them off my watch for sure, but LinkedIn is important for me to keep connecting with folks like you guys. So you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm there every day. Maybe on Sundays I'm not, but sometimes I like to post some Sunday self-reflection videos. So I don't know if you guys caught my last one. I moved a dead possum on LinkedIn. I don't know if anybody else saw that, but yeah, check that out. I don't know if Jerome. I think Jerome missed it. I was out there taking the trash out. Yeah, you got to go check this when I'm messing with possums. What did you say, Jerome?
I saw it, man. I was grinning the whole time because I was like, this is going to be good. I go on the journey on the gator. I saw it. I don't miss much, man. I don't miss much.
Well, Jerome's coming to Kansas City here pretty soon. He's going to get a little bit of the old farm life. We'll definitely take him down there and see the cows. But you can find me at livefreeinvestments.com. Rodney, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. That or LinkedIn, because Logan is everywhere along with Jerome producing notifications.
I love it.
We want to let you guys know that we really appreciate you coming on here tonight. And for the listening audience, if you would do us a favor, either give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down and leave a comment in there. We'll have contact information for these guys in it. And we will be back again next week. And I think Dan is back and we're doing some underwriting during COVID type of stuff next week. So it should be really good. But man, this has been an awesome show, you guys. We really appreciate you guys bringing your A game to this tonight.
Well, thanks for having us on.